Well, hello there. Welcome back. Let's see, it is Sunday, May 22nd, 2022. And this weekend in Philadelphia, it was 100 degrees basically yesterday and today, which felt pretty insane. Um, and now the storm is rolling in though, so it's kind of gray outside. And I thought it's a good time to return to part two of No One Is Talking About This. So if you've been following along, then you know we've reached the end of part one, and I've sort of said the second half of this novel is very different. And I should say before I dive in that it's pretty sad. So, get your Kleenex if you're the type, and just prepare for something very different in tone. So here it is, part two. Despite everything, the world had not ended yet. What was the reflex that made it catch itself? What was the balance it regained? You'll be nostalgic for this too, if you make it. Everyone at gate B6 was bathed in gold. She sat there with one foot off the edge of the earth, close to falling, until she saw the couple with matching extravagant mullets that hung down past their shoulder blades. The man took a brush out and began to fight through his mullet until it was free, and then he handed the brush to his wife, and she began to fight through hers with the same consecrated look. These mullets were their acre, and when God came down, he would find not a rock, a stump, a weed. They shook out their hair together as if it were the same head, joined hands and rested. She sat in the gold that made them the same and felt a little less like dying. The cursor blinked where her mind was. She put one true word after another and put the words in the portal. All at once, they were not true, not as true as she could have made them. Where was the fiction? Distance, arrangement, emphasis, proportion? Did they only become untrue when they entered someone else's life and butted trivial up against its bigness? Perfect children played forever in the portal. Impossible to believe they would not grow, surpass our height, end up a better monkey in that evolution of man drawing. A 23-year-old influencer sat next to her on the couch and spoke of the feeling of being a public body. His skin seemed to have no pores whatsoever. Did you read? They said to each other again and again. Did you read? They kept raising their hands excitedly to high five, for they had discovered something even better than being soulmates, that they were exactly and happily and hopelessly the same amount of online. I have a theory, she said to the crowd, and then paused, for somewhere she thought she heard someone groan. She tried to resume, but she couldn't recall what she was going to say. Something about being a woman in our time. In Vienna, the little cakes looked like the big buildings, or else the big buildings looked like the little cakes. She ate both, layer upon layer. Then, as she swung in the highest car of the Ferris wheel in the Prater, coffee sloshing in her stomach above the linden leaves, her phone buzzed, and there were the words from her far mother. Something has gone wrong, and how soon can you get here? Fast, 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 fast. If the world is still there when she gets here, ha ha. Gap, 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 gap. Great gap in the thrumming of the knowing of the news. The question that was the pure liquid element of the portal, who am I failing to protect, had found its stopped clock answer. She fell heavily out of the broad, warm us, out of the story that had seemed, up till the very last minute, to require her perpetual co-writing. Oh, she thought hazily, falling rain-wise like Alice, finding tucked under her arm the bag of peas she once photoshopped into pictures of historical atrocities. Oh, have I been wasting my time? Women don't look like that anymore, the man next to her on the flight home barked, staring at Marilyn Monroe's hips as they fishtailed their way in sequins across her iPad. She nodded with unexpected sympathy. It was one thing they could agree on, that women, whatever progress they might have made, did not look like that anymore. Women, she thought, rubbing hopelessly at the ruined wing of her eyeliner, would never look that way again. Tell me, she said to her mother in the car. The last maternal text had just been a row of blue hearts, and the spurting 3 droplets, which she no longer had the heart to explain, were jizz. Her mother laid her head against the steering wheel and began to weep. The strange and sideways uses to which art were put. She stood in the hospital dark with her sister, holding her slender hand and smoothing a wave of bleached hair back from her forehead. Her sister's husband rocked back and forth on his heels, boyish in basketball shorts and flip-flops, unable to stand still. The tech moved the ultrasound wand over the curve of stomach until a huge whomp of heart filled the room, red, black, and fuzzed at the edges, somehow functioning. They were waiting for the baby to move her diaphragm, the tech explained, in and out, in and out. This would show that her body was learning how to breathe. The tech watched and watched, pressing the wand so hard that her sister cried. On the ultrasound monitor, a small everything swam and bulged. It was impossible to look at the gray and black wash of it and not be reminded of both the History Channel and outer space. Still, the baby would not practice her breathing, would not practice it in preparation for being born. The baby would not practice being in the world. Why should she? Until she said to her sister, I have an idea, and took out her phone to blare the up-tempo songs of the Andrews sisters, sturdy mules and wide lapels and high brass shining in the hospital dark, music for the boys to listen to overseas, far from home and frightened, bright lungfuls for them to gulp before they headed over. It had been useful. It was useful again. The baby, where she did not need to, breathed. The tech could see everything, the head that was measuring 10 weeks ahead of the rest of the body, the asymmetry in arms and legs, the eyes that would not close, but she wasn't allowed to say anything about it. She marked down measurements, her mouth like a single stitch. At the end, she smiled shyly. I like your music, she said. For a while, all anyone could talk about was what the baby might be missing in tones of portent and doom. Forgive me for thinking, she argued in the shower, that every baby should get to have an ass. Call me old-fashioned, but I happen to believe that a baby should get to have an ass no matter what. Saw my daughter's blank on the ultrasound. Been this way so long, I don't know how to be anymore. None of the doctors, nurses, or specialists ever breathed a word about abortion because 26 weeks was already too late, because it was Ohio and the governor's pen was constantly hovering over terrible new legislation, because the hospital was Catholic and there was a statue of Jesus holding a farm animal in the lobby. You never exactly knew. Did you read that article? Her sister asked one morning, and immediately she knew which one. A woman who had to fly hundreds of miles to Las Vegas, fight head down through a churn of protesters, and finally lie down on the table in a paper gown behind 6 inches of bulletproof glass. Keep thinking of the protesters, her sister said, spit flying from their mouths, how none of them knew. I'll drive you, she said in desperation. I'll drive you, I'll do anything, just say the word. Her sister nodding sadly, both seeing that possible desert whip past, that sage and sand, those lilac mountains. They had never been, of course, had only seen the movie Showgirls. Both knowing the journey wouldn't be safe, both knowing their parents would never speak to them again. She remembered that long ago trip to Norway, where one morning on her way to the market, she heard a thin, high, strained sound, like a yellow thread pulled between 2 fingers. It was aimed through the top of the head instead of at the back of the teeth. So she knew immediately that it was religious. It was anti-abortion singing, led by a woman in a long cobwebby skirt and a man in a white collar who was standing next to her with a tambourine. Behind them were 2 ginger-haired, freckled young men with Down syndrome, embracing each other with both arms and their cheeks pressed close. Oh my God, she had thought back then. As soon as our pro-lifers figure out they can have a tambourine, it's over. If I were you, honey, one social worker told her sister, I might just go out running and see what happened. They blinked at her. Surely that wasn't safe. Surely they hadn't been transported back to 1950s Ireland. Surely no one would advise her next to drink a bottle of gin in a hot bath. What she worried for was not just her sister's life, but her originality. She loved Star Wars so much, for instance, that she had walked down the aisle to the Imperial March. Would the impulse to walk down the aisle to the Imperial March, which seemed the essence of survival itself, the little tune we hummed in the dark, would that make it out of whatever was happening alive? She went silent in the portal. She knew how it was. She knew that as you scrolled, you averted your eyes from the ones who could not apply their lipstick within the lines, from the ones who were beginning to edge up into mania, from the ones who were horny, from the doms who were not remotely mean enough, from the nudeness that received only 8 likes, from the toothpaste on the mirror and bathroom selfies, from the potato salads that looked disgusting, from the journalists who were making mistakes in real time, from the new displays of animal weakness that told us to lengthen the distance between the pack and the stragglers. But above all, you averted your eyes from the ones who were in mad grief, whose mouths were open like caves with ancient paintings inside. If all she was funny, and none of this was funny, where did that leave her? Okay, I think that's a good place to stop. And it's sort of harrowing, you wouldn't imagine maybe that so much of this would seem so relevant given what's been happening in the news with reproductive politics and Roe v. Wade. But one thing that I just want to say before I sign off for today is that even though this section, this part 2, feels really different and will feel increasingly different, I just want to point out that it is written in the same style as the first half of the book, with these very short paragraphs with asterisks in between. So there's some continuity here, I guess, to think about as we go and once we get to the end. I hope you're well wherever you are. I hope you're staying safe, and thank you for tuning in. I hope I'll see you here before too long.